So this month, if you've haven't noticed, we've been highlighting different ministries that we kind of connect with and cooperate with and work with from around our city to try and help have a bigger impact in our community. And so this week we're highlighting the rescue mission, and we've taken groups in the past to be volunteers there. And if you're not familiar with them, Tyson just shared, he's one of our, actually he's going to missionary school to become a missionary, and he attends here, him and his fiance, and like he said, he spent some time last summer, quite a bit of time, volunteering at the rescue mission. So if you'd like more information about, if you'd like to volunteer there, they always need help, like with things like serving food, and one of the things that we've done in the past is we've gone and before every meal, for the homeless side of it, I don't know how they do the other side of it. I've only kind of personally had experience with the homeless side. And before every meal that they serve or before they let people sleep there, they have a church service. And in that church service, they just share with everyone about Jesus. And it was so encouraging. One of the times that I went there, the guy who was kind of, he works there now, but he was homeless. And he went through the program that they have to try and help people move out of homelessness and become productive members of society. And so now he works at he has a job as an employee at the rescue mission in trying to help pass to the next person that ability to move out of whatever their situation is. So that's the rescue mission, and if you'd like more information about that, you can ask any one of us pastors, and we'll point you in the right direction. We love top 10 lists, right? How many have ever looked up like top 10 something on the internet, right? Yeah, we do this all the time. And I was doing it the other day, and I discovered this website. It's called thetop10s.com. And it has all these different categories, like and people can go and vote for these. Like, what are the top 10 animals? What are the top 10 books? What are the top 10 airlines? What are the top 10 ice cream flavors? What are the top 10 movies of all time? And this one was kind of interesting. It was, what are the top 10 athletes of all time? So I'm just going to give you the top 5 and see if these would be on your list. And if they're not, go to the website and vote, thetop10s.com. So the top 5 athlete of all time, see if you would guess this, Michael Phelps. Not a bad choice. Number 4 was Usain Bolt. Number 3 was Wayne Gretzky. Can anyone guess number 2? Oh, Michael Jordan's number 1. Number 2 was Muhammad Ali. So this is interesting. So if you don't like that list, just go there and you can vote and get your input in there. We've been on this series called we've called the Family Values series, and we've been going through God's top 10, the top 10 commandments that God gave us, or actually gave it to Moses years ago, and we're studying them even now, thousands of years later. And as a matter of fact, maybe you've heard this before, the Old Testament had way more than 10 commandments that God gave to the nation of Israel. It had actually 613 commandments, which included things like civil laws, ceremonial laws, moral laws. But God gave these top 10 commandments to Moses to be the moral laws of Israel that God wanted the nation Israel to follow. And one thing that I think is interesting about these 10 commandments is they're kind of divided into 2 sections. And maybe you've heard this before. If not, this is pretty cool. You're going to like this. Well, at least I like it. The first 4 commandments talk about how man relates to God. And they include these. Number 1 is, I'm just going to shorten them to make them easy. Number 1, have no other gods. Number 2, don't have any idols. Number 3, don't take God's name in vain. And number 4, keep the Sabbath day holy. And those are all under the category of how mankind, not man as in just man versus woman, but how mankind is supposed to relate to God. The second 6 commandments are how mankind are supposed to relate to other mankind. Those are things like 5. The 5th one is honor your father and mother. 6 is don't murder, don't kill each other. 7, don't commit adultery. 8, don't steal. 9, don't lie. And 10, don't covet. So the first 4 is how we are supposed to relate to God. The second 6 is how we're supposed to relate to each other and have good relationships with each other. Now, this is where it gets really cool. So Jesus was asked one time, out of all the 613 commandments, what is the most important? And Jesus said, I'll tell you what. We're going to divide, I'm going to tell you 2. I mean, he didn't say it exactly like that, but he said, this is the most important commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And 2, love your neighbor as yourself. And isn't it cool? Those 2 things are the exact same categories that the 10 commandments are. How do we love God better? Commandments 1 through 4. How do we love others better? Commandments 5 through 10. I just think that's really cool. God reaffirmed, or Jesus reaffirmed those 10 commandments and kind of just summarized them in, hey, if you want to know the most important thing that God wants for us, is 1, he wants us to love him better, and 2, he wants us to love each other better. And if you want to know how to do that, you should study the 10 commandments. So that's what we're doing. We're studying the 10 commandments. Isn't that cool how that all works together? The thing is, these 10 commandments, you know, they were given to Moses thousands of years ago, but yet they are timeless values. And they not only are they timeless, they don't, you know, they apply to every culture, to every race, to every ethnicity. That's the end of that statement. Not only are they timeless, but they do apply to every culture and every race and every ethnicity. But the interesting thing is this, not everyone agrees. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, there were some atheists who decided that we need to rewrite, try and say that 10 times fast, we need to rewrite the 10 Commandments. So they decided to have this competition, or I don't know if you call it a competition, but they did a survey, and they had all these people submit what they think would be the most important commandments for today. Those 10 commandments, they're outdated. They were given thousands of years ago, so these atheists are like, we need new commandments. So they had over 2,800 suggestions of what the new commandments should be, the new 10 commandments, and then they got 13 judges. I don't know how they chose the judges. And they decided these were the most popular, and they called them the 10 non-commandments. And I'll just, some of the interesting, five of them are kind of interesting to me. Number one, or this one is, be open-minded and willing to alter your beliefs with new evidence. That's one of their top 10 commandments. Number 2, every person has the right to control their own body. We see how our society actually many people believe this. Number 3, God is not necessary to be a good person or to live a full and meaningful life. God is not necessary. Well, that makes sense that they would say that. They're atheists, right? Number 4, there is no one right way to live. That's what they consider the non-commandments. And number 5, this one's not bad. Leave the world a better place than you found it. And then they had 5 other ones. I'm going to go all through all of them. The interesting thing is this. In a recent poll, thankfully, in America, they did this poll trying to decide which ones of the commandments are relevant, of the original 10 commandments, not these non-commandments. And so they did this poll. They said, which ones? And they took, surveyed all these people. Tell us which ones you think are still relevant for today. And I think there's kind of good news and bad news. The good news is, in America, the majority, and they categorized it by each kind of generation, like from, how they classify generations, like Generation Z, Millennials, and blah, 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 blah. And so they said, but overall, and this is kind of cool, almost between 85 to 98% of all Americans agreed with the commandments of how we should treat each other. So how mankind should treat mankind. So I thought that's kind of good news. We kind of can focus on bad news all the time. So I thought, well, that's kind of good. We all, pretty much in America, we agree that we should treat each other in a better way than what some of us do. The bad news is this. Pretty much less than between 40 and 50% agreed with the commandments about how we should treat God and how we should view God, which you can see that in our culture. Our culture just continually is moving away from a biblical worldview and a worldview that includes God as the creator of the universe. So we see that happening, and it's kind of sad. It's really sad, actually. It breaks my heart. And I don't go a day without thinking about how so many people in our culture and our society around us are on a path to destruction, not only on this earth, but in eternity as they move away from God. Another good piece of good news is this, though. There's about 7,400 languages in the world, and I discovered this week that almost 10% of all those languages have the entire Bible translated into their language, which is great. As a matter of fact, Tyson in the school, his fiance, the school they're going to in Waukesha, their whole goal is to try and go and reach unreached people groups and help get them the Word of God and translate unreached people groups the Bible. And currently, there's over 2,800 Bible translations in progress of different languages. So there are people who are making great progress to try and get the good news of God's Word out to people around the world. Now, one of my favorite, I wouldn't say favorite, one thing I enjoy doing sometimes is reading a lot of times I read different versions of the Bible and just trying to get different perspectives. The English versions, I don't really know other languages. But one of them is kind of like another language, and it's called the Hawaiian Pidgin language. And I just got a kick. So this week I was reading through the Ten Commandments, and some of these Ten Commandments in the Hawaiian Pidgin language just made me giggle. And so I just have to tell you a few of them because they're funny. So, you know, how we have, honor your father and mother. Theirs is, listen to your mother and your father. I'm not trying to say it with an accent. They spell fada, F-A-D-D-A-H. How do you say that? Fada. Listen to your, listen is L-E-E-S-E-N. Listen to your mother and your father. This kind of made me giggle. This one is pretty similar. No murder, nobody. That's how they talk. That's good. This one really made me laugh. No go momo with your brother's wahine. No go momo with your brother's wahine. So if you want a new name for your spouse, wahine is it? And then this is the one we're going to talk about today. No cockroach nutting. That's do not steal. Apparently cockroaches steal. I don't know. No cockroach nothing. No cockroach nutting. That's the Hawaiian Pidgin for do not steal. So today we're kind of on the downward slope of this series on family values. We've already covered commandments 1 through 7. Today we're covering 8, which is do not steal. And I think you might, as I was studying for this and preparing for this today, I found out some things that I thought, that I hadn't really thought of in the whole context of stealing before. Because like you, I thought, oh, well, I'm pretty good at not stealing. I haven't really had a big problem with stealing. But then as I got deeper into the weeds of studying this, I found out, oh, I probably have some things I need to work on in the category of do not steal. And so we're going to talk about today. There's 3 things that we're going to outline, and we're going to go through these 3 things, and then hopefully you'll all stay for some ham and rolls afterwards together, and we can talk about what it means to no go momo with your brother's wahine. So 3 things that we're going to talk about under this category of do not steal is the unexpected implications, the uncomfortable applications, and the uncomplicated reparations. So these are the outline I'm going to follow here today. So first, let's look at this. The unexpected implication. And that is this. There's two things. One is that God entrusts me with ownership of private property. And the whole idea of do not steal, that commandment, do not steal, is that God assumes that there is something that belongs to me and not to someone else. Or there's something that belongs to someone else and not to me. And so I shouldn't take that thing that belongs to someone else. Yeah, I should, if that's someone else's car or someone else's phone or someone else's wallet, that belongs to them and not to me. And there's many places in the Bible where it affirms this whole idea of owning personal private property. And as a matter of fact, as you read through like in Exodus, in Deuteronomy, where it talks about all these different laws that the Israelites had, the Israel nation had, it goes through like specifically outlining what the particular punishment would be if you were to take someone's livestock or having your livestock feed on someone else's land. You're stealing their feed for your animal. And the Bible affirms this idea that God entrusts us with ownership of private property. And then the second thing, which I think is an unexpected implication, is that God entrusts me with the stewardship of that private property. Psalm 24 says this, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all of its people belong to him." And when I realize that God commands others not to steal my stuff, I understand that I have responsibility for how those things are used that God has given to me. I've been entrusted with these possessions by God who created the universe. And I think the whole idea of stewardship, it's more than just physical possessions, because God also entrusts things like our time and our talents and opportunities that we have to serve others and give to others. And we're going to be accountable to God someday of how we utilize our time, how we utilize our talents, how we utilize the possessions that God gives us. And so this biblical view of God making us stewards of private property is the reason that Christians have been opposed to Karl Marx and Marxism, who was the founder of communism, because his worldview led him to the belief that private property should be abolished and the government should take over everything and redistribute it. And when when the government takes away my right to own private property, then I'm no longer free to act as and obey God as the steward of the property that he has given me to manage and care for. And so we see this all over the place, that nations that restrict ownership and restrict private property end up living in poverty. And the reason why is because they're going against God's standard. They're going against God's command, where God talks about, this commandment, do not steal. So those are two things that I think are implied in this whole idea of commandment number 8, do not steal. And it's interesting, this week, if you follow like financial news, Target came out with a financial report, and they said that this year so far, they've had over $400 million worth of retail theft. And they're expected, by the end of this year, they're expecting to have over $600 million, which is, you get over like $1,000 in my mind is like, oh, I can't even imagine this. But millions of dollars that people are stealing. And I think, people steal from people steal from places, and it's not only just talking about physical possessions. When God says, do not steal in the 10 Commandments, it's not just talking about physical possessions. And that's why I want to transition here and talk a little bit about some of what made me uncomfortable, the uncomfortable applications that this might lead us to, this whole concept of stealing. And number one is this. We can steal from others, and this is where, I think we're going to find in this category that, maybe I struggle with stealing a little more than I thought I did. The number one way that we could steal or from people that's an uncomfortable application is if we mislead customers. And Amos 8, chapter 8, verse 5 says this. And it was talking about them in this kind of context, and it says, people were overcharging, they used false measures and fixed the scales to cheat the customers. And they were being scolded because they were doing this. And you just think about, all of us have probably had experience it. Hopefully we haven't done this to other people, but maybe we have. But, we have experiences where a repairman on our vehicle or maybe comes over to your house to repair your furnace or something. And you find out later that they did unnecessary repairs because they were just trying to increase their pocketbook. Or maybe a doctor gives you unnecessary tests because, same reason, increase their pocketbook. Or salespeople, they get blamed for this all the time. Different salespeople, they sell you stuff you don't need so that they can increase their own pocketbooks. And, I think one way, if you've ever sold a vehicle or been sold a vehicle with issues, not telling someone all of the potential problems that are going on with that vehicle, that's a form of stealing. All these things are ways where we are misleading, whether we own a business or not. We could mislead people, and that's a form of stealing. It's interesting. I was reading about all these companies who have been sued for misleading advertisements, misleading ad campaigns. And I won't give you some of these just I got a kick out of. There was a particular company, I won't tell you their name, but they were sued and ended up having to pay millions of dollars because they weren't using real meat in their tacos. I'm not mentioning any names. And then there's been car companies who have overstated their horsepower of their vehicles, and they've had to pay out millions. This was funny. There was a cereal company that claimed that if you eat their cereal, your immunity is going to be boosted. You won't have to worry about any viruses if you eat their cereal. Well, they ended up having to pay out money for misleading ads. But this was the funniest one to me. There was a shoe, I'm not telling you the name of the company, but the shoe company, they claimed that if you wear their shoes, you are going to burn more calories and lose weight. So, I guess if you wear shoes and you walk or run with them, that would be true. But they were claiming, I guess, all you got to do is wear the shoes, and then you're going to lose weight. So, anyway, we have to be careful of this. If we mislead customers or mislead people, that can be a form of stealing. Second, uncomfortable application. If we deceive our employers, or when we deceive our employers. Colossians 3 says this, whatever you do, work heartily as if for the Lord, not men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive an inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord in everything you do. And I think as employees, it's not only necessarily if we are stealing merchandise or stealing product or something, but it can be things like wasting time on the job. Or it can be things like, I'm going to come in late or leave early, or I'm going to take extra long breaks. I had a friend one time, and he says, oh, yeah, I take 3 smoking breaks a day. I'm like, do you smoke? He's like, no, but everyone else gets to take, all the people that smoke get to take their smoking breaks, so I'm going to take my smoking breaks. And I'm just thinking, I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. And it's a way that we or he can steal from our employees is we don't do an honest day's work for an honest day's wage. Another thing that's really popular now, and people say, oh, I'm doing this in the name of work-life balance, is they call it, you've heard this term, quiet quitting. And it's people who are just, they aren't actually quitting their job, but they're just doing at least amount possible to get by because they feel like they're not being adequately paid for the work that they're doing. And maybe that's true, but I don't think that's what God intends for a way for us to handle that. That can be stealing from our employer. I have a friend that I haven't seen for 20 years, and this last week, my wife and I, they were in town. They live in Michigan, and we went out for dinner with them, and we were getting caught up on things. And he works for a big company, Pfizer, the medical company, and he was saying that, and he's worked himself up, and he's like now in charge of a bunch of people, and he was saying that there was another management type person who had left the company, and they asked for him to take over that guy's responsibilities while they're trying to find a new person to replace him. And of course he said, I mean, he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. And he's like, oh yeah, sure, I can take care of that. So now he's doing really 2 full-time jobs, or trying to do 2 full-time jobs, and not getting any extra compensation. And I asked him, I'm like, how do you handle that? Like, don't you get angry? He's like, no, he said, you know what? They pay me really, really well. And this is just a short temporary thing. And he had like the most positive attitude about it. And it's like the exact opposite of it's the opposite of quiet quitting, right? It's like, I'm going to give my all. I'm going to do the best I can. And yeah, maybe I don't get everything done on both of our plates. Now he's doing 2 jobs, but he's going to give it his best shot. And he's going to do everything he can because he has that value. He doesn't want to steal from his employer. And he has the exact opposite. Another uncomfortable application that might apply to us is when we default on loans. Psalm chapter 37 says this: the wicked man borrows and never pays back. And you know what's sad is some people, they intentionally borrow money from someone with the intention of never paying it back. And hopefully that's not you. And hopefully, you know, I heard this years ago. I think it was from Dave Ramsey. And he said, you know what? If you're going to loan money to family or friends, don't do it. He said, just give it to them. Because Thanksgiving dinner tastes better when you're not angry because someone hasn't paid you back, who's part of your family or a friend or whatever. And I think that's wise advice. If you don't loan money to someone who you're close to in case something happens, and just plan on giving it to them. Give them something. Don't loan it to them. And then you don't have to worry about them defaulting on their loan. But even defaulting on loans, it can be more than money. It could be, hey, say you borrowed a tool from someone, you didn't return it. Say you borrowed a book from someone, you didn't return it. Or some kind of equipment, anything. If you have anything like that, you borrowed from someone, you're done with it, you should return it. It's a simple thing to do, right? Ask yourself, is there anything in my garage or my house that belongs to someone else? You can take care of it. Another uncomfortable application, number 4, deceiving the government. Deceiving the government. Romans 13 says this: pay your taxes and government fees. Yeah, they had that back then too. Taxes and government fees to those who collect them, and give respect and honor to those who are in authority. Now listen, there's a difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. So like, if we're avoiding paying, it's okay to avoid paying taxes that you don't owe. I mean, you should know what your tax laws are. You know, if you own a business or if you're working, you know, you don't need to pay more taxes than what are due, but don't evade taxes and be deceitful, because that's a form of stealing from the government. And the Bible doesn't want us to do, God doesn't want us to do that. Tax evasion is stealing. Tax avoidance is okay. So just check yourself on that one. And the last thing I want to mention here that could be an uncomfortable application of this passage or of this commandment is when I don't think I had the right one on there. This should say when we withhold from giving to God. I think I messed that up. Sorry, guys back there. And when we withhold from giving to God, Malachi 3 says this, should people cheat God? Yet you have cheated me. But you ask, what do you mean? When did we ever cheat you? You have cheated me of tithes and offerings due to me. Now, just a quick word on this. God required the nation of Israel in the Old Testament to give 10% of their wealth back to him. And 10% tithing was part of God's covenant with Israel. But when Jesus died on the cross, God established a new covenant with mankind, which doesn't require us to tithe 10% anymore. But under the new covenant, this is what it says. Christians are commanded to support those who preach the gospel, be generous to those in need, and don't let wealth become an idol in our lives. And so many Christians have continued to tithe and give 10%. Some Christians give more, some Christians give less. But the idea is everything, like we talked about earlier in Psalm 24, everything on this earth is God's anyway. So giving some back to him should be easy, but it's not. It's difficult for a lot of us because we like to hold on to our wealth. And that could be a way that we are stealing from God, is we make idol. We talked about this a few weeks ago. We make money an idol in our lives. So let's ask this question. I'm going to give you some answers, some more specifics, and these kind of still fall under this category of things that might make us feel uncomfortable in this particular topic of stealing. Why should I stop stealing? Why stop stealing? And 4 things I want you to think about. Number 1, I am being watched. I am being watched. People steal things from others because we think we're not going to get caught. And we justify our actions. Oh, this is just one towel. They're not going to miss that from the hotel. I'm worth more than my employer pays me anyway, so if I take this, it's something I'm due. But we are being watched. And we're being watched not only by God, who sees everything, but also we're being watched by others. Job 34 says this, for God watches how people live. He sees everything they do. Whoa. He sees everything we do. No darkness is thick enough to hide wickedness from God's eyes. And, we can fool our employers, we can fool the government, we can fool our friends, but we can't fool God. He sees us. He watches everything we're doing. And one day, we're going to stand, Romans 14 says this, one day we're all going to stand before God and give an account for our actions here on this earth. But not only are we watched by God, we're watched by others. And, Christians are given this category sometimes of being a bunch of hypocrites. And the sad thing is it's true. There are a bunch of hypocritical Christians because we don't act with integrity. Jesus said this, you are the light of the world. Like a city on a hilltop cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In this same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your Father in heaven. People are watching us. People know, and when we tell people, and hopefully we're telling people this, that I'm a Christ follower, I believe in God, I believe God in the creator of the universe. And when we do that, people watch us. And they want to see that we're living life with integrity. And when we don't do that, it harms not only our testimony as an individual, but it harms the testimony of all Christians. A second reason why we should stop stealing is the Bible teaches, I will harvest what I plant. Galatians 6 says this, do not be misled. You will always harvest what you plant. God created our planet to be organized in this way. For example, if I plant a seed of corn, what am I going to get? Corn, right? If I plant an apple tree, what am I going to get? An apple seed? An apple tree, right? Yes, right. And so God created our universe to work in this order. So when we cheat people, we can expect to get cheated. When we take advantage of people, we can expect to get taken advantage of. When we live with integrity, we can expect to be blessed. We'll harvest what we plant. Proverbs 15 says this: whoever is greedy, this is a little bit of a scary verse. It catches your attention. Whoever is greedy for unjust gain brings trouble. Who do you think it brings trouble to? Himself? To his family. Not only when we do evil, when we steal, do we bring trouble upon ourselves, but we bring trouble to our whole family. And you see that happening, people doing evil, and it impacts the whole family. People, someone embezzles something from I just heard this week. You hear about this stuff all the time. Someone embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from a company. Oh, I was just watching a TV show. That's what it was. And I won't tell you the whole story, but it impacted the whole. This guy ends up getting caught, going to jail. Well, now his whole family suffers because he's no longer around to help provide for the family. And you see that happening when we don't follow God's commands. Number 3, why should we stop stealing? I am damaging my character when I steal. Proverbs 10 says this: riches gotten by doing wrong have no value, but right living will save you from death. There's no value to getting riches the wrong way. Jesus said this. Jesus called Satan a thief. And then he said this: the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. That's what Satan does. I come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. And when we seek dishonest gain through stealing, then we're siding with Satan and not Jesus. People think, oh, well, you just can't be successful in the marketplace without cheating and stealing and fudging a little bit. And it's not true. As a matter of fact, years ago, I don't know, it's like 25, 30 years ago, I read this book called The Millionaire Next Door. And it was about, this guy did this study of all these people who are millionaires that you would never suspect are millionaires. And he asked them the question, what is it that you attribute to your success? And almost 100% of them said in their top 10 of things that made them successful was integrity, being honest, doing the right thing, not stealing. And the idea that the only way you can get ahead in life is to take advantage of others is just not true. And if we trust God and do what he says, you'll discover that. The fourth reason why we should not steal is my integrity will be rewarded. Proverbs 28 says this: the trustworthy person will get a rich reward, but a person who wants quick riches will get in trouble. People want to get rich quick so that they can stop working and just enjoy life. And I think the problem is people have a wrong view of work. People think that our reward in life is to not work. That's our big reward that we're going to get, is to not work. And then they seek unethical ways to get to that place as quick as possible. But the reality is this: God gives us all abilities and passions so that we can function in society. We must be interdependent upon one another to make our society work, which means that for our society to exist in a positive way, people have to provide goods and services to one another. And when we don't do that, we call that work. When we don't do that, a society doesn't function well. It doesn't function well at all. That's why we had so many problems with with all these supply chain issues when that happened over the last couple of years. It's because when we tell everyone, okay, don't work, well, who's going to make the stuff that we want to buy if no one's working, right? It seems logical, but people have all this idea that, the big reward of life is going to be when I can stop working. And I think our goal shouldn't be, okay, how soon can I stop working? It should be, how do I find work that I enjoy so that it doesn't seem like it's work? And people think, that's not possible. I guarantee it's possible. I've met tons of people who love what they do and who don't want to even stop working. And they don't. They work. We have people in this auditorium that are in their 80s and they're still working. And they love it. And they love to help people. And that is not the goal, is to see how quick can we stop working. And not only that, the Bible says this. Jesus said this. Our greatest reward from work is not the things that we're getting on this earth. Our greatest reward is in heaven. Jesus said, don't store up treasures here on this earth where moth eats them and rust destroys them and where thieves will break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moth and rust can't destroy and thieves can't break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desire of your heart will be also. And when we are doing an honest day's wage for an honest day's work, that is pleasing to God, and that's what he wants us to do, not steal from each other. And our integrity will be rewarded in heaven. All right, 2 final things. Say you've messed up in this, as I have in this whole category. I was really convicted as I was going through this and studying this week. How do we make it right? Uncomplicated reparations. Number 1, if you can, make restitution. If you've achieved something, if you gained something through stealing or dishonest gain, make it right by going to whoever or whatever that was and paying for it or giving it back or whatever that is. Zacchaeus was a good example of this. He was a dishonest tax collector. And one night, Jesus decided he was going to have dinner with this dishonest tax collector, because the way tax collectors worked back then is people would be assigned to be a tax collector, and then they would overcharge people and get to keep whatever extra they charged someone for themselves and give the rest to the government. And so Zacchaeus had been doing that. People hated him, as they did most all the tax collectors. And Jesus said, but Zacchaeus he was a bad one. And people didn't like him, and he had harmed a lot of people. So Jesus said, I'm going to have dinner with him. They go have dinner, and at the end of that dinner, Zacchaeus committed to giving back all the things he had taken unjustly, dishonestly, 4 times from what he had taken. And Jesus said about him at the end of their encounter together, salvation has come to this home today. And that was his way of saying, you are doing the right thing, Zacchaeus. Good job. So whatever restitution you might need to have, if you've taken from your employer, whatever it is, from a neighbor, whatever it is, make it right. And secondly, make an honest living. Paul was writing to a group of people in Ephesus, and he said, he was going through all these lists of things that they needed to do if they wanted to be on the right path and follow God's plan for them. He said, stop lying. He said, stop letting anger control you. Stop using all the abusive language that you're using. Stop slandering one another. And then he says this, if you are a thief, quit stealing. Instead, use your hands for good, hard work, and then give generously to others in need. An idea is we need to serve others. We need to do honest work for an honest day's wage and follow God's command to not steal. Let's close in prayer, and then we will dismiss. just take a moment as we go into prayer here and just think about your own life. Is there any place in your life that you need to ask God to forgive you for stealing, for dishonest gain? Just take a minute and ask God in your own heart to forgive you for that. And then ask God to give you the courage to make things right with whoever that was that you took something from dishonestly. And then finally, ask God to help you live a life of integrity from this day forward. Father, I just want to pray for everyone in this room now that you would give them wisdom to know what to do with the things that we talked about here this morning regarding your 8th commandment, to not steal. And Lord, for each and every one of us, that you would just make it clear in our minds where we need to do better in this area. Give us wisdom to know what to do and the courage to do it. I ask this for everyone in here. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I think